the crux of this presentation is going to be all about showing you how you can create more advanced layouts without using CSS. So my goal throughout this presentation is really to change the way that you think about layouts. You might see a design and think, oh, this should be one thing, when really it should be like two things. And that doesn't make any sense right now, but as we go through this presentation, I promise it will. So this is the design that we're going to be kind of working off of today. And I want to go over just like how to create some of these layouts in a way that are going to be responsive. And just first of all, how to even build these out inside of Squarespace. So the first thing that we're going to be focusing on is the header, because there's one thing that I get really annoyed about in Squarespace with fixed headers is this little like header shift. So you might have noticed this on sites, and it only happens if you have the header set to fixed. So if you don't have the fixed header toggled on, then this won't be an issue. But if I edit the design and come down here, I have it set to fixed basic and my height is set to 2 viewport width units, and we get that little jump. And so my first, no code tip for you, we're not going to be using any CSS today, is to just set a height of 1.8 or lower, and you will no longer get that little jump. So Squarespace, when you scroll, if your heading height is set greater than 1.8 viewport width units, then they add a padding on scroll of 1.8 viewport width units. So if you have it set to 1.8 to begin with or lower, then you won't get that little jump where the header is doing, changing size slightly. So that's my first no code tip for you. If you want to get rid of the header jump, set your header height to 1.8 viewport width units or lower. Okay, so now let's kind of jump into the crux of the layout. So the first thing that I want to talk about is split layouts. I love split layouts. So the way that you do this, you just edit the section. I'm sure you guys have done this all the time. Toggle off fill screen so you don't get any padding on the top and the bottom. You drag your image to be full width. You set it to fill instead of fit. And boom, we now have this split layout. But you'll notice in the design, we have this block that's overlapping the two sections. So if you haven't done overlapping content before, there's a cool trick that we're going to be using, and we're going to be kind of expanding on this trick as we move through this video. So if I go to my home 2, all the ingredients that we need to create this overlapping section are just a shape block and then our thing that we want to overlap the sections. So in this case, I have this image with this Thrive Studios logo. So all we have to do to get the overlapping block effect is to just drag this shape block to be the full width of the screen. And let me go ahead and do that. And now we can just drag this block down to the bottom of the section. And as long as this shape block's background color is the same color as the next section, then it looks like this block is overlapping the two sections. So it's a really simple trick, but overlapping content is a great method to incorporate into your designs because it breaks up the page from just feeling like a bunch of sections, like a bunch of horizontal lines going across the page. You'll see some websites and it's just section, 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 section. So definitely recommend incorporating this little trick into your designs. The next thing that I want to look at is how to create this like full height section here where we have the text above the image. I love this effect where it looks like, the text is like in the sky here and it's seamless as you scroll down into the image. Now we could very well, have this be a completely separate looking section by having this have like a different background color. And then we get back to that kind of like section, section, section look, where like, here's a section, here's a section, here's a section. And so having the section background be the same color as the sky in the image is a great way to, again, it keeps your design from feeling so monotonous and kind of, blends the sections into each other. So your instinct might be to set up the content in this section and then to just upload the image as a really tall image with space in the sky. So here you can see we have our van image, but there's enough space in the sky for our content to kind of like live up there above the van. So that's probably your instinct. And then we can just drag down this section so we have room for the van. And because when I saved the image, I saved it really tall, there's like enough room for the content up here. So this is probably your first instinct on how to kind of like recreate this layout. And it's a good thought, but the reason that this doesn't work is because when we go to mobile, there's no way to kind of have this content be readable because it's directly over the van image. And there's no way to get this van below the content because it's all just a single background image. So the fix to this is, again, we're thinking about our layouts a little bit differently. So it's actually better to have this one section be two separate sections, because we then have more control over the kind of like sizing and spacing of things on mobile. So the correct way to build this out is actually to have this content just be in its own section. And we've given this section a background color that's the same as the background color like of the sky in the image. And what I've done in Photoshop is I've cropped this image. If I go to the background, so hopefully you can see here, I've cropped this image like directly to the top of the van. And in Photoshop, I've gone with a paintbrush with this solid background color and just painted across the top of the sky to make sure that all of the sky in the top of this image is the same color as this section's background color. And then if we take the focal point and drag it to the top of the image, and the reason that we need to do this is we want to make sure that the top of the image is always in frame. So we never want the top of this van to be like accidentally cut off. And if we drag the focal point to the top of the image, then we make sure that the top of the image is always in frame. And because in Photoshop, I've taken kind of like a soft brush and made sure that the top of the image, the sky color here is the exact same color as the image above, we now get a seamless kind of blend where it looks like this is all in one section. And then what I can do is just drag down the grid here until we get the van. And we want to stop before it starts zooming in because then we know we've gone too far. So here is about the height that this section should be. And the great thing is now on mobile, we know that the content can never overlap the van image because it's in a separate section. So then now this content looks like it's still in the sky. And then in terms of, like sizing this section here, if I drag it all the way down, then that's kind of like the right aspect ratio for this image where the whole van is in view. And if I go out of preview mode, I'll save and exit. And now we get this cool effect where we still get it looking pretty seamless, like this content is in the sky, but it's more responsive now, like this text is very legible and we get the whole van image down below, as opposed to kind of, the not so good layout that we had here in the first one. So obviously this one looks much better. And the cool thing is we took that concept of if this shape block's background color is the same color as this section, then it looks seamless. And we've applied that to images. So if we take an image and we make the top of the image the same color as the background section, and then we drag the focal point to the top, so we always have the top in view. Now this looks like a completely seamless blend between a solid color and an image block. So I've done that on my own site, which I want to touch on real quick. So to make sure that this layout is responsive, and this is different, so we're not working with like a split layout anymore. This looks like it's like a single banner image, but again, I would run into the problem on mobile of the text overlapping the background image and it wouldn't be that legible. I wanted that laptop to make sure it was down below and that my content wasn't overlapping the laptop. So if we go down to mobile view, you can see like this is a really nice responsive mobile layout, because what I've done here is if I edit the page, this is actually just a PNG image block. And then you can see the background is just a background gradient. So because I have this image in an image block, I can determine its layout on mobile, and I have full control over kind of like how this appears on mobile. It's not over the whole section in the background, so I'm free to drag this image block down below and get it to look exactly how I want it to. And for the background, if you wanted to go a no-code approach, you can come to the background and set up like a background gradient, but I've used CSS, so I have a little bit more control over the gradient, but you could definitely do this as a no-code solution. But again, it's taking that principle of, this looks like it would be a singular background image, but in fact, this is a PNG over a CSS gradient, and that gives me more full control over the mobile layout. So just think about how you can maybe tweak your layouts a little bit too, and you can do some really cool things. Especially with like parallax and stuff. Like imagine I, had some sort of a background image in this section and I made the background parallax. So then the content in front could be just scrolling with the page, and then the background could be parallaxing just by kind of breaking up the foreground and the background into two separate images. So it's those little things, just kind of tweaking your thinking about how you're going to be building things out can lead to some really, really cool designs. And also can make, for a better user experience like this. So I forgot to touch on one thing, and that's what if in the Figma design we wanted to do rounded corners like this. So this is kind of becoming a very popular trend. And again, it just sort of breaks up that linear cutoff. And now this section feels like it's more blended with the second section. So let me go to Home 1. And your first instinct might be to do a section divider. And that's a good instinct because if we toggle that on, they do have a section divider style that is exactly what we want with the rounded corners here. But the problem is it adds it to the bottom of the section. So if we had a full width image, this would be a great way to do it. I can now pick like whatever background image that I want for the section. So let's say like this van was my background image. When you have a background image, it'll get cut off by the section, which, if that's your layout, then that's great. But in this case, we have the split layout where our image has to be an image block. And because the padding gets added to the bottom of the section for the section divider, we can never cut off this content. So we can't do it with a section divider. We have to, think about this approach a little bit differently. So the way that we can do it instead is if we select this image, we can go to design and we can add a corner radius to it. So we want the bottom left, we'll do like 50 pixels. So now we get that rounded approach, but we need the color to be the same color as the next section. So what we can do is add a block. Let's go ahead and add a shape block. And this shape block's background color just has to be the same color as the next section, and then we'll move it all the way to the back. And so you can see if this color was the same color as the next section, it now looks like this image is kind of bleeding over. And let me see what that color is. I'll grab that. And so now I'll give this a custom color. There we go. But how about, this section has a tan background. So how do I get the kind of like rounded corner? Well, we're going to go ahead and add another shape block, and we're going to make this shape block's background color the same as the section background. So I'll kind of position it like that, and then we'll go to the tan color. And now for this one, I'm going to make sure that its bottom right is 50. And there we go. Because this shape block is now positioned on top of our other shape block, it now looks like, this whole section kind of has like, the rounded corners. And then of course we just need to move this shape block behind the image, but keep it in front of the blue shape block. And now we get this like, double rounded edge, which is a cool effect. Now you might be wondering how this breaks down on mobile. So let's go ahead and head to our mobile view, and we just have like our shape blocks down below. So we have our image block, text blocks, button blocks, and then we can decide how to arrange these shape blocks. So one thing that we can't avoid is this image is always going to have a rounded corner in the bottom left. And there isn't really a way that we can get rid of that because we need it to have a rounded corner on desktop. But what we can do is kind of like align these blocks. So I'm going to have this one go full width. And if you hold Control, if you're on a PC like I am, then you can, expand both edges at the same time, which is a handy little shortcut. And then we can overlap these blocks. And then that way we get like a rounded corner on the image on this side, and then we get a rounded corner on the section on this side. And that's a pretty nice design. I wouldn't be, upset with that on mobile. I think that looks pretty good. And then I can shrink down these blocks and then drag them up. That way there's not so much padding on the bottom of the section. So that's a pretty nice design there. If you did want the shape block to also have kind of like a rounded corner on the bottom left, Then we can head to desktop view, and all we have to do is take this shape block and just extend it farther behind the image since it's hidden anyways. Then we can add a 50 to the bottom left. And then that way on mobile, you know, we can't help but have the image be rounded here, but now on mobile we get a similar design where like the bottom of the section is rounded leading into the next section. So a couple different options on mobile. And if we go with this second design, we have this rounded corner on the image here, which we probably don't want. And I know this is a no-code presentation, so if you want a truly no-code approach, go with the first layout. But we can use one line of CSS to get rid of this rounded corner here. And here is the snippet that we need. So we're setting a media query, so this only applies to mobile and it doesn't apply to desktop. And then we are targeting this block by its block ID. That way we're only affecting this one image. And then we can change this element to have a border radius of 0. And that way we get rid of the rounded corner. So all we have to do is target this block by right-clicking on it and clicking inspect, and that'll bring up the Chrome inspect tools. And then I can scroll all the way up until I see SQS block and image block. That's how I know I'm on the right element. And then we should see an ID that has block dash a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this ID and paste it into the snippet where it says block ID, making sure I leave the hashtag beforehand. And now I can just copy this snippet into the page's header code injection. And I need to add style tags whenever we're putting CSS in code injection. And the reason that I like to put it in the page's header code injection is because this CSS change is only affecting this one image on this one page. So I don't like to clutter up my custom CSS window with really specific CSS like this. So it just helps you kind of stay organized. Now, if you're on the lowest plan, then you don't have a choice because you won't have access to the page header code injection. So just make sure that you always have a comment about what the CSS is doing. If you do need to put it in the site-wide custom CSS window, that way you know like what this CSS is applying to. And in that case, I would also put the page and the section name. So just trying to give yourself a good idea about what elements the CSS is impacting on your site. So as soon as I hit save, that will get rid of the rounded corner on this image. And so now we get a more similar design to what we had on desktop where only the bottom of the section is rounded. And it won't affect desktop because again, we use that media query on the CSS. So again, I hope this was really helpful in just thinking about layouts a little bit differently. You can do a lot of really cool layouts without the need for CSS. Again, by just thinking about how you approach things a little bit differently, and it can result in some really cool layouts and some nice responsive designs.